Honesty is a weapon. Generosity is a trap. The moment you believe they come without strings attached, you've already lost. Power is rarely seized in the open. It is not the brute force of armies or the dazzling charisma of leaders that ensures dominance. It is often the subtle, almost invisible art of disarming others before they even realize they are in danger. Among all the weapons in the arsenal of power, few are as deceptive and as devastating as selective honesty and generosity. Why? Because these are the very things we are trained from birth to trust. From the time we are children, we are told that honesty is virtue, that generosity is goodness, that to trust someone who gives is to anchor ourselves in safety. But in the game of power, these virtues are not shields, they are bait. Consider what happens in a negotiation, a conflict, or even in a casual relationship. The natural instinct of your opponent is to protect themselves, to raise their guard, to prepare for manipulation. They assume deception. They prepare for resistance. If you try to overpower them with argument, they resist. If you threaten them, they fight back. But if you give them a gift, if you offer honesty at a moment when they least expect it, their defenses collapse. They believe in you, and in that belief they expose themselves completely. This is the paradox of Law 12. Your enemy's shield is not broken by force. It is lowered by trust. In the jungle of business, politics, or even intimate relationships, this tactic works with mathematical precision. A CEO in the middle of a corporate takeover does not storm in with threats. He offers a partnership, a token of goodwill. A politician under scrutiny does not lash back at critics. He admits to a minor fault, a controlled act of honesty that paints him as transparent while concealing the greater crime. A con artist does not steal through aggression. He returns a lost wallet, earns trust, and then empties bank accounts later. The reason this law is so effective lies in the architecture of human psychology. Trust is not earned over years. It is won in moments, moments that bypass rational thought and sink deep into emotional reflexes. A single act of apparent selflessness can erase years of suspicion. One well-timed confession can make a lifetime of deception believable. But let us be clear. This law is not about moral honesty, nor about noble generosity. It is about selectivity. Too much honesty, and you are weak. Too much generosity, and you are exploited. But the right amount, at the right moment, used with surgical precision, it is an instrument of control. This is what makes Law 12 dangerous. It turns the very qualities society celebrates, truth and giving, into strategic weapons. You are not being honest for honesty's sake. You are not being generous to help another. You are doing it to destabilize, to seduce, to lower defenses, to control the battlefield. And if you fail to understand this law, if you naively believe that honesty and generosity are always virtues, you will be played by those who know better. You will trust the wrong people, surrender leverage, and walk willingly into traps built on your own assumptions about goodness. The world of power is not about who is right or wrong. It is about who controls perception. Selective honesty is perception management. Selective generosity is emotional sabotage. Both are weapons disguised as kindness. In this breakdown of Law 12, we will first enter the world of history, where a single act of generosity reshaped empires. We will then descend into psychology, exploring why the human brain is wired to surrender to honesty and gifts. We will examine modern examples, politicians, CEOs, manipulators, who mastered this tactic. We will expose the rookie mistakes of those who misused it. And finally, we will build a practical arsenal, how you can deploy selective honesty and generosity in your business, your relationships, your negotiations, without ever becoming a victim yourself. Because here is the truth. In the game of power, no one is honest all the time, and no one is generous without motive. The only question is whether you will use these forces, or whether you will be destroyed by them. Main historical example. In the mid-16th century, England was a kingdom trembling on the edge of chaos. The throne was unstable. Factions within the court plotted endlessly. And the young Elizabeth Tudor had just ascended to power in 1558. Surrounded by enemies at home and abroad, Elizabeth was brilliant but cautious, determined but paranoid. She trusted no one, not her advisors, not her nobles, not even her own blood. It was into this world that William Cecil entered, a man who would become the greatest political manipulator of Elizabeth's reign. Cecil was not a warrior, not a noble with armies, not even particularly charismatic. What he possessed was something far more potent, the ability to make Elizabeth trust him when she trusted no one. And he achieved this not with raw persuasion or brute force, but with a carefully orchestrated performance of selective honesty and generosity. The challenge. Elizabeth was not a fool. She knew every man at her court wanted something: titles, land, influence, gold. She had grown up watching courtiers betray one another with smiles. If Cecil had approached her with flattery, she would have dismissed him as another sycophant. If he had demanded power, she would have grown suspicious. To win her trust, Cecil had to appear different. The strategy. Cecil began with an extraordinary act of honesty, an honesty that seemed reckless, even dangerous. Shortly after Elizabeth became queen, when the air was still thick with uncertainty, Cecil presented her with a private memorandum. In it, he did something no other courtier dared to do. He listed not only the kingdom's strengths, but its vulnerabilities. He exposed weaknesses in the treasury, flaws in the military, dangerous alliances abroad. It was not a flattering portrait, it was brutal truth. At first glance, this was madness. Why risk angering the queen with a catalogue of her problems? But Cecil understood the deeper psychology. Everyone else at court was feeding Elizabeth half-truths, telling her only what she wanted to hear. By presenting harsh honesty, Cecil stood apart. He created the illusion of transparency, of loyalty untainted by ambition. To Elizabeth, who longed for at least one man she could rely on, this honesty was intoxicating. The events. The strategy did not end there. Once he had established the image of honesty, Cecil reinforced it with selective generosity. He gave not with money, though he did that too, but with information. In the dangerous chessboard of Tudor politics, knowledge was currency, and Cecil gave Elizabeth pieces of intelligence before anyone else. He made her feel protected, supported, armed with foresight. Each gift of knowledge, each carefully chosen truth, deepened her dependency. When foreign ambassadors tried to sway Elizabeth with bribes, when rival courtiers attempted to seduce her with loyalty, Cecil always countered with something subtler: the appearance of selflessness. He offered Elizabeth advice that seemed to go against his own interests. He appeared willing to sacrifice. And each time, Elizabeth rewarded him with more power, more access, more control. The impact. By the end of her reign, Cecil had become not just her most trusted advisor, but the architect of Elizabethan England. He orchestrated foreign policy, guided military campaigns, even influenced her personal decisions. He was not the king, but he shaped the kingdom more profoundly than many kings ever had. All of this power was built on a foundation of selective honesty and generosity. Cecil was never fully honest. He concealed his ambitions, manipulated information, twisted outcomes. But he was honest enough, at the right moments, to appear genuine. He was never endlessly generous. He withheld as much as he gave. But his gifts were always timed to create dependence. The legacy. Cecil's mastery of this law was so complete that even historians sometimes describe him as the loyal servant of Elizabeth. They forget that his loyalty was itself a strategy. He cultivated the image of honesty not because he was honest, but because it was the most effective mask for manipulation. Elizabeth died in 1603, but the dynasty Cecil helped preserve, and the power structures he built, would shape England for a century. His son, Robert Cecil, inherited his methods, proving that the family understood this law as legacy. The lesson is brutal but clear. In a world where everyone expects deception, the rare act of apparent honesty or generosity is the most effective deception of all. Cecil never wielded a sword, never commanded an army, but through Law 12, he conquered the throne from behind the throne. Psychological/strategic mechanism. Power is not simply about resources or titles. It is about control of perception. To understand why selective honesty and generosity are so effective, we must strip human psychology down to its core. The truth is brutal. We are hardwired to trust gifts and confessions. The very things that make us feel safe are the same levers that can be used to enslave us. 1. The biology of trust. From an evolutionary standpoint, honesty and generosity signal survival. Among hunter-gatherer tribes, sharing food meant loyalty. A man who confessed a mistake showed vulnerability, which reinforced group cohesion. The tribe survived because it could detect freeloaders and reward givers. Over thousands of years, our brains evolved to respond with gratitude and trust when someone gave to us or confessed a truth. This is not rational. A single act of giving triggers a neurochemical flood, oxytocin, the so-called bonding hormone. When someone gives us a gift, our defenses lower not because we calculate the benefits, but because our biology forces us to. Similarly, when someone admits a fault, our brain interprets it as a costly signal. If they were lying, why would they risk exposing weakness? We assume sincerity, even when it is a trap. Cecil knew this instinctively. Con artists know it intuitively, and those who ignore it remain perpetually vulnerable. 2. The psychology of contrast. Deception works best when it hides in plain sight. If all you ever do is lie, people become suspicious. If all you ever do is give, they suspect motives. But when you mix, when you provide an unexpected gift or a sudden act of candor, it creates contrast. And the human mind is designed to notice contrast more than consistency. Imagine someone who deceives you 9 times, but on the 10th offers you something genuine. That single act of honesty will loom larger in your memory than the 9 lies. Why? Because the unexpected feels more real. This is why selective honesty is far more powerful than relentless honesty. It is memorable, it feels authentic, and it lodges itself in the victim's psychology. 3. Ego and reciprocity. Humans hate to feel indebted. When someone gives us something, we experience discomfort until we return the favor. This is the principle of reciprocity, one of the strongest levers of social influence. Salesmen use it with free samples. Politicians use it with favors. Leaders use it with small acts of kindness that compel loyalty. But the true master does not drown his victim in generosity. He gives just enough to create imbalance. The victim feels obligated, forever trapped in a cycle of repayment, while the manipulator asks for more than he gave. One coin gifted today can justify an empire tomorrow. 4. The illusion of transparency. Selective honesty preys on our need to believe we can see the truth in others. When someone confesses, we assume we are glimpsing their real self. In reality, this is often the most carefully crafted performance of all. Consider the criminal who admits to a minor theft to distract from a major fraud, or the politician who admits to a youthful indiscretion while concealing systemic corruption. The victim believes they are witnessing vulnerability, when in fact they are watching misdirection. The illusion of transparency is one of the deadliest illusions in human psychology. 5. Control through dependence. When generosity is used not as abundance but as rationing, it becomes addictive. Give too much, and the victim becomes independent. They no longer need you. Give sparingly, selectively, and they remain desperate for your next act of kindness. This is the strategic core. Generosity not as flood, but as drip. You keep the victim thirsty. You keep them waiting. You condition them to crave your approval, your gifts, your honesty. And in that craving lies control. 6. Why it works better than fear. Fear is effective, but unstable. Rule by fear, and your enemies conspire. Rule by force, and they resist the moment you weaken. But rule by selective honesty and generosity, and they enslave themselves. They choose to trust you. They choose to lower their guard. They choose to remain loyal. That is why this law is more enduring than intimidation. The victim is not coerced. They are seduced. 7. The strategic paradox. This law is paradoxical. The very things people claim as their highest virtues, truth and generosity, are the easiest to corrupt. Society tells us to value them. Religion tells us to trust them. Culture rewards those who appear to embody them. And so, when you deploy them selectively, you can bypass the most guarded defenses. Cecil became indispensable to Elizabeth, not because he flattered her, but because he gave her what she thought no one else dared to give: truth. Rockefeller built loyalty not through wealth alone, but through well-timed acts of generosity to communities. Rasputin disarmed the Russian royals not through threats, but through the gift of healing and apparent spiritual honesty. All different in context, all identical in strategy. The essence is this: selective honesty and generosity work because they weaponize the deepest instincts of human psychology. They make the victim believe they are safe, when in fact the chains are tightening around them. They make manipulation feel like loyalty. They turn deception into intimacy. In the game of power, every sword is visible, every shield is obvious. But selective honesty and generosity? They are invisible weapons. And by the time your enemy realizes they've been struck, it is already too late. Secondary examples. 1. John D. Rockefeller and the dime. John D. Rockefeller, one of the most ruthless businessmen in American history, cultivated an image of generosity. As a titan who crushed competitors with monopolistic precision, he could have been remembered as nothing but a predator. Yet he strategically softened this image through selective acts of giving. One famous story: Rockefeller would hand out shiny dimes to strangers, children, and visitors. The gesture was trivial in money, but monumental in symbolism. People remembered the gift, not the destruction of small businesses he orchestrated. By sprinkling tokens of generosity, Rockefeller concealed the iron fist of Standard Oil beneath the velvet glove of charity. The dime was never just a coin. It was a distraction, a charm, a trap. 2. Rasputin and the royal family. In early 20th century Russia, Grigory Rasputin, the so-called Mad Monk, gained influence over the Tsar and Tsarina not through force, but through the gift of healing. When the young heir Alexei suffered from hemophilia, Rasputin seemed to ease his pain. Whether through hypnosis, calm presence, or sheer coincidence, the result was the same. The royal family saw him as a miracle worker. Rasputin presented himself with selective honesty, claiming divine visions, confessing sins, and admitting to his own weakness as a sinner. This paradoxical honesty disarmed suspicion. Combined with the gift of apparent healing, it bound the Tsar and Tsarina to him. He became untouchable, not because he seized power, but because he made them give it to him willingly. 3. Warren Buffett's self-deprecating honesty. In the modern corporate world, Warren Buffett has mastered the art of selective honesty. Known as the Oracle of Omaha, Buffett often admits to mistakes in his annual letters to shareholders. He highlights errors, confesses misjudgments, and even jokes at his own expense. To the untrained eye, this looks like vulnerability. To the strategist, it is disarmament. By admitting small failures, Buffett builds the image of trustworthiness. Shareholders believe his larger claims because he must be honest. After all, he confessed to mistakes. His empire of credibility rests not just on returns, but on the illusion of transparency crafted by selective honesty. 4. Richard Nixon's Checkers Speech. In 1952, Richard Nixon faced scandal. Accused of misusing campaign funds, his career was on the edge of collapse. But instead of denial or aggression, Nixon delivered a televised address in which he admitted to accepting one gift, a dog named Checkers. With tears in his eyes, he confessed that his children loved the dog and that he would never return it. The honesty felt raw. The generosity, the image of a man receiving something so simple as a dog, disarmed critics. The public was moved. Nixon survived the scandal. Decades later, he would fall for other reasons, but the Checkers speech remains a textbook example of using selective honesty and an emotional gift to neutralize attack. 5. Steve Jobs and the Illusion of Generosity. Steve Jobs, co-founder of Apple, was notorious for his tyrannical leadership. Yet he deployed selective generosity to inspire loyalty. When Apple launched breakthrough products, Jobs often presented them not as his genius, but as gifts to the world. He spoke of giving people tools to unleash their creativity, framing Apple as a benefactor rather than a profit machine. Inside Apple, Jobs occasionally gave rare praise to employees, so rare that when it came, it felt like gold. His stinginess with approval made every word of generosity addictive. Workers would endure cruelty for years just to hear a single honest compliment. Jobs understood the principle. Generosity means little when constant, but when rare and timed, it becomes irresistible. These examples reveal the diversity of Law 12 in action. From oil tycoons to mystics, from politicians to CEOs, the pattern repeats. A small act of generosity masks massive exploitation. A carefully chosen confession makes lies believable. A rare gift or praise becomes more powerful than endless flattery. The lesson is universal. Honesty and generosity are never neutral. They are always tools, either in your hands or in someone else's. Beginner mistakes. For every master who wields selective honesty and generosity like a scalpel, there are 100 amateurs who butcher it. The difference between control and collapse is subtle, but fatal. Let us dissect the common mistakes beginners make when attempting to use Law 12. 1. Mistake. Too much honesty. Naive players believe that honesty itself is the virtue. They reveal everything, confessions, vulnerabilities, secrets, thinking it will win them trust. Instead, it wins them weakness. When you overshare, you lose leverage. Information is power, and once given, it cannot be reclaimed. A subordinate who admits every insecurity to a boss does not gain trust. He gains contempt. A politician who tells the whole truth is not admired. He is devoured. The principle is clear. Honesty must be measured. Selective, not absolute. Too much honesty is self-destruction. Second mistake. Generosity without strategy. Amateurs often equate generosity with constant giving. They shower gifts, favors, kindness, believing they are buying loyalty. In reality, they are creating dependency not in others, but in themselves. People grow accustomed to endless generosity. They stop valuing the gift. They start demanding more, and eventually they despise the giver for their weakness. The leader who tries to buy loyalty with constant rewards ends up with spoiled followers who turn on him at the first shortage. Generosity only works when it is rare, timed, and calculated. Too much, and it breeds entitlement instead of gratitude. Third mistake, the wrong timing. Timing is everything. A confession given too late feels like desperation. A gift given too early feels like manipulation. Beginners fail because they don't wait for the moment when defenses are high. The entire power of selective honesty and generosity lies in its contrast to expectation. You must offer it when your victim is suspicious, guarded, resistant, so that their sudden collapse into trust feels dramatic. Without timing, honesty is invisible. Without timing, generosity is meaningless. Fourth mistake, believing in sincerity. This mistake is the most dangerous, believing your own performance. The master understands that honesty and generosity are masks, not mirrors. They are roles played for strategic effect. The moment you start thinking you are truly honest or truly generous, you lose the detachment required to wield these tools. History is full of leaders who began by using gifts and confessions strategically, but ended by convincing themselves they were saints. They fell not because others exposed them, but because they exposed themselves. Never confuse the role with the reality. Honesty is a tactic, not a virtue. Generosity is a weapon, not kindness. Fifth mistake, confusing scale with power. Another rookie error is assuming that greater gifts create greater loyalty. They give more money, larger rewards, massive acts of generosity, believing size equals impact. In truth, it is often the small, symbolic gift that disarms the most. Rockefeller's dime was worth almost nothing. Nixon's dog was trivial compared to the scandal. Rasputin's healing was intangible. Yet all three reshaped history. The beginner who believes that generosity must be grand reveals his desperation. Worse, large gifts often provoke suspicion. Why is he giving me this much? What does he want in return? Subtlety is strength. Excess is weakness. Sixth mistake, using it against the wrong target. Some people cannot be disarmed by honesty or generosity. They are too cynical, too seasoned, too hardened by betrayal. Beginners often waste their tactics on these players and expose themselves in the process. You must choose your victim wisely. The gullible, the needy, the insecure, the ambitious, these are fertile ground. But the paranoid veteran? He sees through your gift, your confession, your trap, and once exposed, you can never use the tactic on him again. Power is not only in using the law, but in knowing when not to use it. Seventh mistake, forgetting to reassert control. Honesty and generosity disarm, but they do not conquer. Beginners often stop after the disarmament, basking in their victim's trust. But trust without follow-up is wasted. The true master uses the lowered defenses to strike, to extract information, to push an agenda, to secure loyalty. The rookie simply enjoys the temporary affection and loses the moment. Every gift must lead to a demand. Every confession must create leverage. Without this, you are not practicing Law 12. You are just being nice. 8. Mistake, repetition without variation. Once beginners find that selective honesty or generosity works, they overuse it. They confess again and again. They give too often. The tactic loses surprise, loses impact, loses power. The victim adapts. The shield rises again. And the manipulator is exposed. The law is about selectivity. If you use it more than necessary, it stops being a weapon and becomes predictable. Predictability is death in the game of power. 9. Mistake, moral guilt. Finally, many fail because they hesitate. They feel guilty using honesty or generosity strategically. They worry it is manipulation, that it makes them immoral. But morality has no place in the pursuit of power. Everyone manipulates, whether they admit it or not. Those who hesitate are simply manipulated by others. Law 12 is not about cruelty. It is about survival. To refuse to use it is to walk blind into the traps of those who will. The pattern of failure. The rookie errors all share one pattern, mistaking honesty and generosity for virtues in themselves. The master knows they are instruments. Misuse the instrument, and it turns against you. Play it with precision, and you control the symphony. The world is filled with corpses of politicians, businessmen, lovers, and leaders who revealed too much, gave too much, or believed too much. Their failures are lessons written in blood and ruin. In power, nothing is pure. Honesty and generosity are no exceptions. Actionable tactics. The theory of Law 12 is nothing without application. You now understand that selective honesty and generosity are weapons. But how do you wield them without cutting yourself? Below are the strategies, tactics, and precise moves to make this law actionable in your daily battles for influence. 1. The surgical confession. How to use it. Confess to a small fault to disguise a larger ambition. Admit to a harmless mistake to build the image of transparency. Example in business. In a negotiation, you admit, "We made an error in last quarter's logistics that cost us efficiency." Your opponent relaxes, thinking you are vulnerable. Then you present your proposal, which appears more credible because you must be honest. Why it works. People anchor on the act of honesty and assume consistency. Once you confess, they assume the rest is true. Trap to avoid. Never confess to something that genuinely weakens your position. Choose faults that are cosmetic, not structural. 2. The token gift. How to use it. Offer a small but symbolic gift. It should be cheap in cost but priceless in perception. Example in networking. At a conference, instead of flashy gestures, give a handwritten note, a rare book, or a subtle act of help. It costs little, but creates immense obligation. Why it works. Symbolic gifts bypass suspicion. A Rolex creates envy, a token creates loyalty. Trap to avoid. If the gift feels transactional or excessive, suspicion rises. The goal is to appear effortless, not calculated. 3. The timed praise. How to use it. Compliment rarely, but with precision. When delivered at the right moment, one line of praise can outweigh years of silence. Example in leadership. After months of pushing an employee hard, you say, "That presentation, flawless. You carried the room." The addicting dopamine surge locks their loyalty. Why it works. Scarcity creates value. Endless praise is noise. Selective praise is gold. Trap to avoid. Overuse. If praise becomes expected, it loses its power. 4. The false vulnerability. How to use it. Reveal a weakness that is not truly dangerous. This lowers defenses and creates intimacy. Example in politics. A candidate admits to struggling with public speaking early in life. This vulnerability makes him relatable while hiding ruthless ambition. Why it works. Vulnerability signals authenticity. People believe they are seeing the real you. Trap to avoid. If the vulnerability is too rehearsed, it backfires. It must feel spontaneous, even if scripted. 5. The reciprocal chain. How to use it. Give a gift, then ask for something slightly greater in return. Repeat, escalating each time. Example in business deals. Offer a small discount to a client. Later, ask for exclusivity. Then, after exclusivity, ask for expansion. Each act of generosity builds a chain of obligations. Why it works. Humans hate imbalance. They will escalate commitments to restore equilibrium. Trap to avoid. Escalate too fast and they resist. Keep the increments small but steady. 6. The Trojan horse honesty. How to use it. Wrap deception inside honesty. Share 90% truth, 10% manipulation. Example in negotiations. Reveal real financial numbers but subtly hide liabilities. Your honesty blinds them to the omission. Why it works. People rarely question once they believe the majority is true. Trap to avoid. If the hidden lie is too large, discovery destroys trust permanently. 7. The scarcity gift. How to use it. Give something rare or time-limited, making the victim desperate for more. Example in personal dynamics. A mentor gives extraordinary advice once, then withdraws. The student becomes addicted, desperate for the next drop of wisdom. Why it works. Scarcity creates addiction. People value what they fear losing. Trap to avoid. Never let them realize you are rationing intentionally. The scarcity must feel natural. 8. The enemy's shield. How to use it. Disarm a rival by being unexpectedly generous. Offer them a favor, a concession, or even public credit. Example in competition. In corporate warfare, you concede a minor contract to a rival who relaxes. Meanwhile, you secure the larger deal they ignored. Why it works? Enemies expect hostility. When you give, their suspicion collapses. Trap to avoid. Do not give away something that strengthens them significantly. The gift must be bait, not empowerment. 9. The delayed return. How to use it. Give first and wait. Do not demand repayment immediately. Wait until the victim has internalized the obligation. Example in networking. Introduce someone to a valuable contact. Months later, when they least expect it, ask for a favor. The delay makes repayment irresistible. Why it works? Immediate demands feel transactional. Delayed demands feel like destiny. Trap to avoid. Wait too long and they forget. Time the ask when the memory of your gift is still alive but not fresh. 10. The controlled exposure. How to use it. Expose a small flaw or secret voluntarily, so no one digs deeper. Example in media. A CEO reveals, "I'm terrible at remembering names." It feels genuine, disarms journalists, and prevents them from searching for real scandals. Why it works? By controlling what is exposed, you create the illusion of total honesty. Trap to avoid. If the flaw exposed is too trivial, it feels fake. If too large, it damages reputation. Choose the middle ground. Final tactical philosophy. Selective honesty and generosity are not about kindness. They are about leverage. Each act must serve a purpose, lowering defenses, creating dependence, manipulating perception. Ask yourself before each move. What defense am I lowering? What obligation am I creating? What perception am I shaping? If you cannot answer, do not act. Silence is better than reckless generosity. Mystery is better than careless honesty. Used correctly, Law 12 allows you to walk into the most guarded fortress and be welcomed as a friend. Used poorly, it leaves you naked, exploited, and despised. Conclusion. Power is never what it seems. It is not loud speeches, grand gestures, or visible armies. True power moves in silence, beneath perception, in the shadows of trust. Law 12 exposes one of the most unsettling truths of the human condition. The very things we celebrate as virtues, honesty and generosity, are the easiest doors to our destruction. Think of William Cecil, who bound a queen not with threats, but with carefully timed honesty. Think of Rockefeller, whose tiny dimes rewrote his legacy. Think of Rasputin, who walked into the royal palace not as a conqueror, but as a healer. Think of Nixon, who survived scandal not with denial, but with the gift of a dog. All of them manipulated through kindness, confession, or generosity. All of them knew the secret. The sword terrifies, but the gift enslaves. At its core, this law forces us to confront a disturbing paradox. We believe honesty reveals character. We believe generosity reveals goodness. Yet in the hands of the strategist, both are disguises. Masks used to disarm, distract, and dominate. The truth is never pure. The gift is never free. Every act of honesty conceals a hidden lie. Every act of generosity hides a silent demand. For those who understand this, life changes. They no longer take confessions at face value. They no longer trust gifts without asking, "What does this cost me?" They deploy their own selective honesty and generosity with precision, surgically, strategically, ruthlessly. They learn that timing, contrast, and scarcity are not abstract theories, but weapons. And for those who ignore this law, they remain prey. They are the executives who trust too quickly, the lovers who give too much, the leaders who believe in sincerity without questioning motives. They are the ones who mistake kindness for safety, honesty for transparency, generosity for love. And they are the ones who discover too late that every leash begins as a gift. The difference between ruler and ruled, master and victim, is not morality, it is awareness. The powerful know that honesty and generosity are not virtues, but tools. They choose when to wield them and when to resist them. They do not drown in sentiment, they swim in strategy. So ask yourself, when you hear a confession, is it truth or a weapon? When you receive a gift, is it kindness or bait? When you give, are you creating power or wasting it? Your answer to these questions determines your place in the hierarchy of life. In the end, Law 12 teaches us this: the chains of power are not forged from iron, but from trust. And the ones who hold the key are those who know when to be honest, when to be generous, and when to strike. If you found this breakdown valuable, subscribe to this channel, because here, knowledge is not entertainment, it is strategy. Next time, we'll expose the subtle art of armed honesty, how a single act of generosity can destroy someone's defenses. That's Law 13. Don't miss it.